All right. Well, if good with you both, I'd love to get started and dive into this special conversation. I know before you want to get started, I know Stuart wanted to say a few words to introduce Terry.
Oh, Terry and I have been friends for 40 years. I met Terry when she was in graduate school at Princeton. I seem to recall I was giving a seminar at Princeton, and Terry picked me up from the airport, and we very quickly learned that we had New Mexico in common. Um, Terry work is world changing. She's one of a limited number of people I know who have very nice plaques on their walls that tell them that they've won the Nobel Prize, the Peace Prize, a few years back for her work on climate change. When I met Terry, she was doing an extraordinary study using what we sometimes call citizen science, crowdsourced data using the observations of millions of bird watchers who go out every winter and count birds and finding that those birds are controlled by temperature and temperatures are changing. And so some of the very compelling evidence for how human actions are warming the planet comes from work that Terry and others organize that show that species of birds are being seen further north. They're arriving earlier in the springtime. They're moving up mountains. Um, all of that from the observations that we as citizens collect. So I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled that Terry is a board member at Saving Nature. And I'm thrilled to listen to her answer the questions that I know you have prepared, Andy. So without any further ado, Andy, it's all yours. And Terry, thank you so much, my love, for being here tonight and talking to us.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank Thank you, Stuart. Yes, and if anyone has any questions along the way, please just type them in the chat, and we'll definitely try to get to all of them, and probably will get to all of them. So please feel free to do that. Tonight we'll explore Dr. Root's incredible journey, her groundbreaking studies on birds and biodiversity, her deep concern about plastic pollution, and what still gives her hope for the future of our planet. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Terry Root. Welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here, and really excited to dive into what made you and learn about what you have to say right now about everything going on in the world. My first question is, can you take us back to those early moments? How did you first fall in love with nature?
Well, I guess I'd say I've always been a bird person, and my mother was a bird watcher, and my great aunt and great uncle were bird watchers. And my mother took me out in Arizona when I was about into southeastern Arizona when I was about 14 years old, and I was just in heaven. And at one point she was going to be fixing dinner and I was getting in her way. And she said, "Take your binoculars and the bird book and go out and look at birds." And so I said, "I can't do it by myself." She said, "Sure, you can." So I went out and I identified a paraloxia and a bridal titmouse by myself. And from then on, I was hooked. I was just absolutely hooked, and I just loved it. The other thing that was super important when I was a kid was my father. He was in the Army Air Corps and taught people how to fly, and so he was a pilot. And we lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he would take me flying, and I got a different perspective of how the world worked than walking around on the ground. Um, and that actually came in to my dissertation defense at Princeton. I just had a completely different way of looking at the world than some of my examiners. And I can remember one man who said, what I was doing is as Stuart said, I was working on the Christmas bird count data, and I was looking on a continent-wide scale. And this was at a time when nobody was doing continent-wide scale work. They were working, Peter Kariva actually did a study to see how big study areas were, and they were about the size of two tennis courts put together. So 86 or 87% of the study areas in ecology at the time were that small. So I had a very different way of looking at how species were interacting and what was interacting with them. And it was it sounds if what I was doing was changing a dogma. And actually, it was so tense that one of my examiners refused to sign my dissertation because I said that um, climate and weather were very important in shaping species ranges. And he said that wasn't true, that it was competition. But here is an example of looking at two different places. One, like the picture that you have of the trees, you can see how broad it is. And anyway, that's what got me excited was putting the birds together with the biogeography and trying to figure out what was going on. And I just loved it, and it was great.
What year was that where they questioned you like that? That is
1987.
1987.
It was very traumatic. Yes, it was.
And I know we were talking before the call. You said that you had a lot of people at the beginning of your career when you had these ideas that happened to, almost just disagree with you on these ideas that r- ended up being true that you had. How'd you deal with hearing these people critique these ideas that you knew in your heart were true? And what were some of these ideas?
Well, the biggest one was the competition. And what I explained was when you have a study site that's the size of two tennis courts, it's easy to see competition going on, but you can't see how hot temperatures are affecting the birds on that scale. But now on my scale, on the continent-wide scale, I could see what was going on at that very large scale, but I couldn't see what was going on at the small scale. So I tried to convince this esteemed colleague that we were both right, but he was insistent and he said no, that climate wasn't a factor in shaping species ranges, which in 87, the dogma was competition. So anyway, when you push a new dogma, you get pushback, let me tell you, and you got to be, well, as I went to my first job as an assistant professor and became what the silverbacks in that department called me was an uppity woman.
Oh,
You
oh
have
my
to
goodness.
you have to you have to defend yourself when you know you're right. And I had the data and the data explained it all. So anyway,
Well, you ended up being right. So, and you were mentioning birds. Uh, you were one of the first scientists to document that birds are shifting their migration and breeding patterns due to warming. Why are birds such powerful indicators of climate change, and what's the latest research showing?
well, Camille Parmesan also was very important in this. She was working with butterflies a bit, and I was working with birds a bit. And what we found was that basically birds are so mobile, and so are butterflies, but birds are so mobile that they can shift around fairly easily. And what happens is that when they start getting too warm, they will shift to a colder environment. And that's basically what all the species now in the world are trying to do. When it gets too warm, they're going to shift poleward and up in elevation. Um, or if they're in the marine life, they're going to go down deeper in the ocean where it's cooler. That's what they're doing in order to stay alive. And that's true actually even for plants. But birds were moving rapidly. And I organized a workshop in 1995 at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and invited biologists from all over the world, from Europe, from Australia, from all over. Um, and the first three talks, basically, we were all talking about different birds from different continents, but we had basically the exact same slides. It was showing how birds were coming earlier in the spring and how they were shifting into cooler areas. And that was a real revelation at the time because it says, yes, the birds are sensing this global signal and they're all doing the same type of thing. So they're coming earlier in the spring, they're leaving a little bit later in fall, but that's not as strong a signal. And they're moving into cooler areas. And um, and as I said, even trees, even bushes, even everything, every living thing is moving into cooler areas. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we just went up the Santa Fe ski area, and I noticed that there were an awful lot of ponderosa pines that are dying because it's getting too warm for them. Ponderosa pines need cool areas, and there's a swath right as the ponderosas are starting that they're dying. It's tough to watch. Anyway, so that's what the birds are telling us.
To me, to me,
Andy, if I
yeah.
could interrupt, Terry, would you tell the story about the woman in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, please?
Oh, you're wonderful, Stuart. Thank
I
you.
love that story.
Oh, there was a woman, and again, being a woman, it was tough being doing professional work. And she was the very, very, very first woman to be placed by Fish and Wildlife at a wildlife area out in the public. And so they put her up in the northern peninsula of Michigan where nobody would see her. But what she did was she went for a walk every morning and on the exact same path, and she would write down the date of the first bird that she saw that year. So the first time she saw a robin in the spring, or the first time she saw a sandhill crane, which was the bird the data that I took from her and studied. And she would write it down. And she had data, and oh, I'm not going to remember. I think it was from in the late 70s. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, she was the first woman to be put in the public. And so it was probably in the 70s. And she had data, and I met her in 90, maybe 90, maybe 91, I don't know. And she was just so excited. I was at the University of Michigan. She had gotten her master's degree at the University of Michigan. And so I gave a commencement speech, and she came up to me and said, I've got data that you got to see. And I said, you've got data I have to see. And I plotted up the plot for the sandhill crane, and it just showed it was coming 2 weeks earlier over that 20 years. And that's a big change. That's a huge change. But she was wonderful. She was a really good biologist. So thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart. And I know you and Terry are dear, dear friends, so it's cool to hear the kind of stories you know, and I'm sure there's so many wonderful stories you two have shared together. Uh, Speaking of your career, you spent your career documenting how warming temperatures are impacting wild animals and plants. What are some of the clearest signals we're seeing right now? And what do they tell us about the urgency of this moment?
Oh man, I I am really concerned. I am very concerned because with Biden and the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, he was actually trying to change this ship, and he was doing a good job. I actually am very impressed with how he was changing things. He was going to do away with drilling. He was going to really help us hit some of the um, the requirements that we need to actually get off of our fossil fuel addiction, and he was doing it. And now what's happening is people are going the other direction. He's going into drill, baby, drill, and he has the oil companies in his back pocket, and I am very frightened by all of this. But anyway, we were coming down, and now I think we're going to go back up, um, and have more of a fossil fuel addiction problem. And what that's going to do is that's going to increase our temperatures significantly. And the IPCC has done, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change has done a lot of careful work trying to figure out what's going to happen when we hit different temperatures. And when we hit those different temperatures, well, if we hit 2 degrees Celsius above natural, we could actually spike in temperature because at 2 degrees above natural, the clathrates, which are frozen methane in the oceans and in the permafrost, are actually going to start melting. And methane is a much, much stronger greenhouse gas than CO2. And so we're going to have all this methane going up into the atmosphere not too long from now, because last year we were at 1.6 degrees C above natural. So it's a little scary. But anyway, when the clathrates, when the methane melts in in the oceans and all, we could spike 2 to 3 degrees higher. And so, if indeed that happens, by 2100, we could easily be at 4 to 5 and maybe even 6 degrees warmer than natural. And that's pretty tough. And the species, humans included, folks, the species are going to have a hard time moving and are going to have a hard time surviving this. So I say that species are moving toward the cooler areas. They're also doing things earlier, but they're also going extinct. And that's the thing that I am the most concerned about. Um, in 2007, the scientists did a really, really careful job of trying to figure out the extinction puzzle. And in 2007, they said when we got up to 2 degrees C above natural, that we could lose a quarter of the species on the planet. And at the time, and still now today, we know the names of about 2 million species. So a quarter was going to be about a 500,000 species. Well, the new studies that have been very careful too are showing now that when we get up to 2 degrees above natural, we could lose half the species on the planet. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it will take a while. But sit back and think about what that means. If we get up to 2 degrees above natural, which I believe very strongly we will, we could doom half the species on the planet to extinction. I have trouble with that as a moral right. Does one species really have the moral right to do that? The other thing I am concerned about is there are going to be numerous species in the species that go extinct that we need to stay alive. Humans need. So, as a selfish reason for all of this, we need to keep those species around. And people will ask me, "Well, Terry, how do you have any hope?" I said, "I have hope for the other half, and I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can for the other half." And we have got to really work to try and take care of this planet. Um, can we do it? Yes, we can do it. There are lots of things we can do. We just have to get off of our fossil fuel addiction and do it. So that's not a very happy answer, but
We'll
it's the
get into hope later, but I'm sure a lot of people on this call really are appreciative of the science behind climate change and mass extinction and want to learn these things because it's important. And your insights are very, very much welcomed. On the topic, you've spoken out about the environmental crisis of plastic and is one of your areas of expertise. Would you mind discussing it further and explaining how it impacts climate change?
well, it impacts climate change because 99.9% of the plastic right now comes from fossil fuels. And about 8% of the fossil fuels that we mine, that we dig up from underneath or pull up from underneath the, the ground, is used to make plastics. That's a lot. And every single pound of plastics, we put 6 pounds of CO2 in the atmosphere. So when you take a plastic grocery bag and
Wait,
multiply,
six?
I'm sorry,
Would you say six?
6 pounds of CO2 for every 1 pound of plastic.
Okay,
Right.
okay. Keep going. Sorry.
So no, that's fine. So if you have enough, if you take plastic bags from the grocery, which a lot of people do, and you put them in a box and you think, I'm going to take them back to the grocery store because they're going to take care of them and recycle them. Well, one, that's false. But think about if you have 1 pound of plastic, how many plastic bags? That's put 6 pounds of CO2 up in the
No, no, it's unmuted. No.
keep going. Keep going. That's my
air. That's okay. Okay. So that's the climate change connection. But then what you need to do is you need to look at all of the poisoning that is going on. And they did a study of sea salt all across the United States. It was a really fun study. But they went around and they got sea salt from all over the United States and they tested it. And they didn't have to do statistics on their testing because 100% of the sea salt that they got from the United States had microplastics in them. 100%. And I gave a talk one time and on just on plastics, and this woman raised her hand. She was very indignant. She says, "I buy very, very expensive um, sea salt, and so I know it doesn't have plastics in it." And I said, "Well, maybe you're right, but I kind of doubt it." And then about a week and a half later, I got an email from a woman. I didn't know her name. But anyway, she says, "I was at your talk. I'm the one who said that I didn't have microplastics in my sea salt. And I was wrong because I went home, I dumped my sea salt into a bowl and wished it around and got the sea salt, the salt to dissolve. And there in the bottom of my bowl was microplastics." So whenever you get sea salt, you are getting microplastics. Microplastics have a lot of chemicals in them. They now are finding microplastics in placentas, in your brain, in your liver, in your everything.
In
It
our
is
brain?
in the brain, in the brain. It has crossed the blood-brain barrier. Um, it is very, very dicey as to what all of this is going to do. They have found microplastics in plaque that are in the arteries around your heart, not your heart, but people's hearts, and have found that they are actually facilitating the deposit of the plaque, which can cause stroke and which can cause um, heart attacks. So we have got to do something about plastics. And the thing that is nice is it's a snap. It's an easy thing to do. Don't ever, 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 ever take another plastic bag, ever. If you have to, carry it out in your arms. Um, don't ever take anything that's styrofoam. Styrofoam is not recyclable. The oil industry has done a really good job of trying to make us think that we're recycling all this stuff. The thing is that only 9% of the plastics that have been made since 1950, the plastics came into existence basically in 1950, only 9% has been recycled. Of that recycled 9%, a little bit more than two and a half. So let's say 3% of that 9% is actually used in materials that are used again, that are recycled. So it is a huge, huge myth that we are recycling things. So the grocery stores will have these big bags that say, bring back your plastic bags and we'll recycle them. Well, when I lived in Florida, I was doing some work on plastics, and I saw a woman come and take the big plastic bag with all the plastic bags that people had put in it, and I followed her. And I followed her right to the dumpster where she put them in the dumpster. So when you think you're recycling something, you really aren't. So stop using anything that's plastic. Stop using detergent in plastic bottles. You can get it in sheets now. Stop using shampoo bottles. You can use shampoo that comes in a bar like you use for your hands, but you can do that. You can do conditioners that way. There are a lot of things you can do to not have plastics. And I have worked really hard to decrease the amount of plastics in our house, and it's happened. So we can do it. We can do it. We just have to get off our tookuses and do it. That's all.
Andrew says, from what I've read, recycling plastic is very problematic. Example, it involves toxic solvents and other chemicals, is very energy intensive, and often ends up with a poor quality product.
Exactly right. They they say that if you recycle a plastic Coke bottle, that there's no problem. It'll just go into another Coke bottle. Well, it may go into one Coke bottle, but then it can't go into any more because the plastic is so brittle that it doesn't hold. And so they have a rule that they will not recycle recycled plastics. So if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Alita says, just found this guy, Julian Brown, who's making diesel fuel from plastic to eliminate plastic waste.
Wow.
So I'll send you the link, Alita,
Wow.
to the group.
Super.
Uh, yeah, but before we move on to the next, you said that 3% of the 9%
Hmm.
of plastic ever made in the world is getting actually used again.
Yes.
So all the other plastic, it goes to the ocean,
Goes
it,
to goes to the ocean. The plastic I use here in New Mexico doesn't go to the ocean. But certainly the plastic I used when I lived in the state of Florida um, will end up in the ocean. The thing is that it's very hard to keep plastics contained. And anyway, they end up in landfills, and some of the landfills don't do a good job of holding them in, and they blow around and they end up in the oceans. They end up going in the rivers then take it to the oceans, right? And we've got a gyre um, that is off of Hawaii. Um, and actually, there's five different gyres around the globe, but the worst one is out by Hawaii, and it's really tough to see. Um, there's a great um, shoot, I'm not going to remember the title. There's a great movie that was done looking at albatross babies on Guam Island, and he thought he was going to be doing this very uplifting video, and what he found was dead babies because the parents were catching all of this plastic that was floating on the on the ocean, and it was like Bic lighters and toothbrushes and things like this, and they were bringing them back to the babies, and all the babies were starving. So it's a real thing, and it is really very, very harmful.
I wanted to talk about something a little more positive for a second,
Yep.
because I think it's important to talk about this while we have you here. You help lead the biological impact section of the IPCC report that won the Nobel Peace Prize. What did that experience mean to you? And what was the most important message you hoped that report would deliver?
The most important message that I hoped that it would deliver was the extinction of species. That was new that year. Um, it it's a non-trivial thing to try and figure out extinction rates. Um, and all of us scientists did a really good job of following the data. And we wanted people to realize that we were hurting the other species on the planet by doing what we were doing. And for a while there, it really made a difference. People stood up and took note and said, "Oh my God, we're causing the extinction of species." And then people kind of got hardened to that and ignored it. But in 2007, when this came out, it was it was very impressive that people started to take note and say, yeah, we're affecting we're affecting species. Um, but winning the Nobel Peace Prize was was really a trip. I don't know how else to say it. It was really exciting. Um, and it turned out the IPCC shared it with Vice President Al Gore. And Al Gore and my late husband, Steve Schneider, were very good friends. And Al happened to be in Palo Alto when they announced the award. And so Al called my late husband Steve and said, "Steve, you come and kind of accept it, not really, but be there as a representative for the IPCC." So we got all the people who were at Stanford, who were on the IPCC at that time, come to the to the announcement. And Al Gore was being hassled about whether he should run for president or not again. And so as soon as he finished his speech, he grabbed Steve, I mean, literally grabbed his arm and pulled him over to the podium and said, "Okay, Steve, now you talk." And he ran. He ran away from the reporters because he didn't want to talk about it. So anyway, it
I
was
remember when he was getting pressed to run again. That
yep,
was
yep. So it was fun, and we really enjoyed it. So it's just a trip, and I only have a millimeter worth of a Nobel Peace Prize, but it sure is fun.
yeah. I just needed to ask what it was like to win one because I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to talk to someone again that has won one. And a lot of people on this call probably this is also their first time talking to a Nobel Prize winner. Adriana said, "I teach teachers and students from K through 12, and what gives me a little hope is that people are talking and learning about it, which was not the case less than 10 years ago."
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the big things that we have to have is a paradigm shift. Like we had a paradigm shift when people were smoking out in public and we didn't like it. And we had a paradigm shift and now people don't smoke out in public anymore. It doesn't happen. We need that kind of paradigm shift. And I truly believe that she is right. I think the young people are really pushing hard to have that paradigm shift happen. Yeah.
Um, I wanted to also just touch on this before we go. Your current work focuses on the possibility of scale extinctions due to climate disruption. What does the science tell us about this risk, and how can conservation efforts like saving nature help avert it?
Okay, this I'm afraid I'm going to say things that are a little um people may not agree with, and that's fine. We have to realize that there are different types of extinction. I mean, extinction is extinction, but what causes the extinction is the issue here. Um, Climate change is going to cause the extinction of species because they can't withstand the physiological change of it getting so hot. They can't do it. And that's going to cause the extinction. It's not like poaching. It's not like habitat destruction. It's not like that type of thing. So there is a group of species that really pretty much not, there's not much we can do to make sure they don't go extinct. But there's a whole nother suite of species that are at risk, and there are a lot of things we can do. So, for example, the ivory bill up in the Arctic. It is, you always found my late husband and I went up to the North Pole in 1994, and he took a picture of a polar bear that had just killed a seal. And there were those blood and guts thrown all over the ice. And there was this little bird called the ivory gull that was going around and eating all that blood and guts. And that was how the ivory gull makes its living. Well, we
Really?
don't we don't we don't have we don't have ice anymore. So the seals are safer, but the polar bears aren't eating the seals and throwing blood and guts all over the place. So in my lifetime, I'm 71 years old. In my lifetime, I truly believe that the ivory gull is going to go extinct, and there's nothing we can do about it unless we go up there and feed it. Um, Maybe some people could do that, but that's going to be take a lot of energy and effort. I really don't think there's not much we can do to save the ivory gull, but there's a lot we can do to save other species, and that's what we have to do, and that's what I focus on, is I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can. Saving nature is working probably exponentially harder than 99.9% of the world trying to save our nature so that things don't go extinct. And we've got to have those organizations out there doing this because we got a crazy president right now.
Well, I wanted to get to a source of hope before we open it to questions. Despite so many challenges, you've said you remain hopeful. You said your students inspire you, uh, have inspired you, and what else keeps you going? And what message would you like to share with people who care deeply but feel overwhelmed?
So if people start feeling overwhelmed, you've got to step back, take some R&R for yourself, and get yourself back to a place where you know you can work. All of us get burned out, and when you start getting burned out, you got to sit back because you can't help when you're burned out. But there's so much that we can do. We can put, all of us need to be supporting renewable energy. We have got to get ourselves off the fossil fuel addiction. If I want to say one thing today is do everything you possibly can to get yourself off the fossil fuel addiction. So the next car that you buy, I'm not saying tomorrow, whenever you're going to buy a new car, make sure that you either buy an electric car or you buy a plug-in hybrid that gets at least 40 miles, 50 miles on the battery, and then you can go around and run your errands on that battery. And I have to tell you, when we lived in Florida, we have a Nissan Leaf, and I love the electric car. And I would come up to red lights, and one of these big old huge trucks would come along, and they'd come up next to me, and they'd look at me, and they'd go room 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 on their accelerator. And I looked up at the light, and as soon as it turned red, I would go streaking out. Man, it was so much fun until one time my husband says, Terry, you're going 85 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. So, anyway, electric cars are wonderful. I love them. I love them. I love them. So, you can do that, but support all renewable energy. We need as much renewable energy out there as possible. Is it going to cause some disruption of species? Yes, it is. But we have got to not cut off our nose to spite our face. Please, we've got to support renewable energy. There's a really great organization. It's called Renewable Energy Wildlife Institute, REWI, and they are doing a lot to try to do the right thing, place renewable energy farms and such at the right places. If you have the money, and actually, even if you don't think you have the money, you probably do, to put solar panels on your house. When we did it in Florida, we we got back our investment within 4 years.
Wow.
Now in Santa Fe, we've had them on for 2 years. I don't know how long it's going to take us to recoup. I can't say if it's going to be 4 or 6, but it's not going to be very long. And I'm helping save the world, and it makes me feel good. We can do that. We can talk to our county commissioners and say, we know how to build zero emission buildings. Is it going to be more expensive? Yes. In the long run, is it going to be more expensive? No. So put in for developers to only build zero emission buildings. Stop eating beef. Stop eating lambs. It really, really makes a difference. The amount of CO2, and I should have this statistic on my top of my head, but I don't. The amount of CO2 going into and methane coming from the cows, um, and water being used is the other thing for raising cows is astronomical. And so just stop eating beef. Can you do it? Yes, you can. You may not want to, but you can. I eat Beyond Burgers. Um, they're not perfect, but they're good. I enjoy them. You can do that and make a difference that way too. So anyway, I'm just scratching the surface. There's a lot of things that we can all do. If you have incandescent light bulbs, throw them in the landfill. That goes for your Christmas tree lights too. You should all be using LED lights, things like that. So, okay, I'll hush now, Andy. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so grateful. And before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to say to everyone listening, if this conversation moved you, we invite you to take the next step. Dr. Rook mentioned offsetting your carbon footprint, and one simple but powerful thing you can do right now is to visit Saving Nature's website, savingnature.com, and use our footprint calculator to understand your impact. And then take a meaningful action by supporting reforestation in the places that need it the most. Every ton of carbon you offset helps restore ecosystems, protect endangered species, and create a livable future for all of us. I'm going to drop the link to savingnature.com right now, and I encourage you all to offset your carbon footprint. I will also be sending a follow-up email to everyone with how to do that. Uh, Dr. Root, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your story, and your unwavering dedication to the planet. I would like to open it up to questions now. If anyone has some, please drop it in the chat, and I'll do my best to get to all of them. Let's see. We have wood shifting. Steve wants to know, would shifting our energy source to nuclear, would it help?
Oh, well, back in the 70s, I was arrested for demonstrating against nuclear power. Um, if if I knew then what I know now, it would be different. Right now, we are in such a bad state on this fossil fuel addiction that we can't take nuclear off the table right now. Now, do I think that what we should do is have the great big huge nuclear power plants? I don't. I think what we need to be doing is having the very small nuclear power plants, similar to what they have on submarines, nuclear submarines, and they show themselves to be very safe. On and on and on. Do we still have a trouble with the spent fuel? Yes, we do. But I don't know how to get around it right now. We don't have enough solar farms. We don't have enough wind farms yet. Um, we should be using more geothermal. Um, there's lots of places that are using geothermal, but anyway, we can't take it off the table yet, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you. Another thing that uh Alita is wondering if you Lita mentioned that wait, hold on. Neil says, is anyone trying to understand the aggregate impact of the current administration's changes to university funding regarding climate change? And can private funding backfill this research?
I don't know anybody who's actually doing the studies, but I was at Stanford University, which is a very rich university, just like Harvard. And I am so proud of what Harvard is doing, is standing up and saying, no, we're not going to take this. And the other rich universities are saying that we will close ranks around you if we need to. The universities I'm worried about are the ones that are small and don't have much money, and they can't withstand all of this. Um, but I think that the rich ones can I mean, they have huge endowments. They can come in and they can actually stand up to Trump. And as long as Trump, I just learned that in his big beautiful bill, he was he slipped in there that he can't be held for contempt of court. That's actually in the bill. That's what I read. Um, as long as Trump still abides by the courts, we've got hope that this administration will be kept a bit in line. Um, if he's not held in contempt and he doesn't have to do anything about it, that's a whole different ball of wax. So
Thank you. Eric says, you've talked about the fingerprints of climate change on natural systems. Could you elaborate on some of the clearest and most compelling fingerprints you observed in your work or the work of your colleagues?
oh my heavens. The ones that I think are the strongest are species that are doing things earlier in the spring. Um, Even the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. are blooming earlier and earlier and earlier. The sandhill crane is coming earlier and earlier and earlier. There are insects and the like that are coming out earlier, and the birds aren't even there yet, and so they get there late, and then they nest, and the insects have already the big push of insects coming out has already passed, and their species numbers, the abundance of that species is dropping significantly. So the thing is that there's all these all these things going on. You look at the trees that are in trouble, that are at the southern end of their ranges, and they're not surviving because it's just too hot. Or the lizards that are in the deserts that stay in their burrows because it's so hot, and they end up starving to death because they can't get out and actually go and feed because it's too hot for them. So I could just list on and on and on and on. There's just an awful lot of them.
Thank you. From Alita, they're saying that the fires in LA have impacted the births of a marine life already. Do you have any insights onto the impact a large-scale fire, urban fire would have on biodiversity?
Ooh, that's tough. I just don't know. I could say something anecdotal, but I just don't know enough. So I'm gonna err on
Totally
the.
understandable. It is such a new phenomenon and something that, I mean, if you offset your carbon footprint, hopefully we can prevent it from happening again. But there's a lot of a lot of uncertainty around that. Rose says, Dr. Root, thank you. You shared so much useful takeaway. What additional change can we make sticky with our daily actions?
What additional changes? Well, I think getting off of your plastic addiction and getting off of your fossil fuel addiction. And what you need to do is sit back and actually take a piece of paper out and write down, when do I use plastic and what can I do to not? Um, like most of us use deodorant. Deodorant comes in a plastic bottle. Well, they now make deodorant in cardboard bottles, so you can use those. Um, if you're gonna if you're gonna go run errands, wait until you have 5 or 6 errands to run all at one time instead of running out, coming back, running out, coming back, running out, coming back. Do it all together. I have a friend of ours that lives about 12 miles away from Santa Fe, and I asked him, I said, "How many times do you go into Santa Fe a week?" And I expected him to say 2. They said something like, I don't remember what the number was, like 8. I mean, it was more than one a day for a week. And I was horrified. And they're people who really care about nature. So you've got to just sit back and say, what are the things that I'm doing that I can change? And please try to stop eating beef and lamb. Those are 2 big ones.
Why lamb specifically?
They also regurgitate their food, so we don't want to have that many sheep out there. Yeah,
We have a question from Joseph saying, it was such a powerful point about the ethics of one species taking out what could be half the species on the planet. Do you have any resources or places to go for elaboration on that point in applied ethics?
that's a really, really good point. I've given 2 sermons actually at Unitarian Universalist churches on on this, um, and I don't have at my fingertips what's being asked for, but I know that a, a a man came up to me after I gave one of those sermons and said that I needed to learn more about Buddhism because there really is a lot of ethical issues that are wrapped up in how one species can cause the demise of another species. So I would suggest looking into Buddhism. And he gave me a book, and a title of a book, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember. It was too long ago.
Well, that was a very interesting question, Joseph, and I agree that point about one species having the right to eliminate half the species. I never heard it phrased that way, and that really shook me. It was very powerful. Before we end, I would love, Stuart, do you have anything you would like to expound upon? I know you're on this call, or ask your friend, or comment on the carbon footprint calculator that Saving Nature does.
Yeah, I mean, there are many, many things that Terry has said. I go to the grocery store with cloth bags because I just abhor the idea of having plastic bags. I'm not, I have not transferred my allegiance to non-plastic bottles as much as I should. It's actually, you've got to start finding the products that are in glass and cardboard and so on. Yeah, and I don't eat a lot of red meat. I just felt that eating beef and lamb is just a bad idea. More than anything else, I walk a lot. I am so outraged by the fossil fuel companies that I do whatever I can to walk to shops, walk to restaurants, and all the rest of it. It's good for me. It's good for the environment. As Terry said, there's a lot of changes we can make. But I do spend a lot of time on airplanes because I visit the projects that we develop at Saving Nature. Um, does that bother me? Well, no. And it doesn't bother me because, we're up to 3 million trees and counting. We are planting hundreds of thousands of trees at Saving Nature in the world's biodiversity hotspots. We're offsetting tens of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide. And so, yeah, please go to our page and offset your carbon sin. This is something we can do. I spend, how much money do you spend on coffee? Well, spend more on offsetting carbon. So there's a
Stuart,
lot we
Stuart,
can do.
something else that I'd like to say is if you can't think of a Christmas present for somebody,
Hmm.
offset their carbon
Offset
footprint.
their carbon. It's a very nice
Lovely
present,
idea.
and we will send you a certificate, no less.
That is right. We'll send you a certificate for each carbon
Um,
footprint you
it's
offset.
It's absolutely something we can do, and we can even point on a map to where we're planting those trees, and we can show you the Google Earth imagery and show you the trees coming back. I mean, I have to say that one of the things that gives me the greatest pleasure is looking at some of the satellite images we have on our website of areas that, 10 years ago were a barren cattle pasture and are now forests. I mean, that just gives me a real thrill because I know we're making a difference. We're making a difference to species, to nature, and taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So, yeah, please sequester your carbon with us.
That's a great idea, Terry, to maybe Christmas present or there's some holidays coming up soon, hopefully. Can't think of anyone top of my head, but just to be nice, I'm gonna send out the link and if this conversation compelled you, we're gonna you could offset your carbon. It doesn't cost as much as you think, and it makes a big difference. This event has been recorded and will be available soon on YouTube and Spotify, and I'll send it out in an email. Please feel free to share it widely. I think Dr. Root's message is one that should be heard from by everyone. And Dr. Root, thank you again for everything you've done and continue to do to protect life on Earth. And to everyone here tonight, thank you for being a part of the solution.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's wonderful to see you. So great to catch up, and thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you. And Andy, the questions that you asked were absolutely spectacular. You did a good job.
Um,
Thank you.
it was all you and everyone. It was such a special moment to hear what you had to say. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night,
Goodbye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Take care.